Should we start?
Yeah, let's start. So the floor is
Ignacio,
mine.
do you want to introduce Ignacio or?
Yeah, I can. Almost nobody knows Yorgos Smaragdakis, but despite of his young age, he has been a few years around. He has published in most of the places that everybody tries to publish, and he's now professor in the University of Delft. And I think that there is not much more introduction needed. He's going to be talking about characterizing and mitigating phishing attacks at the ccTLD scale. And with that, the room is yours, Yorgos.
Okay, thank you very much, Ignacio. And I see that a lot of collaborators and friends have already joined. So it's a great pleasure to be here. I hope next time I will be in person. So today I'm going to talk about a new activity we have with some of my colleagues. And as you can see, there are a lot of people involved about characterizing and mitigating phishing attacks. And for this audience, I don't really have to say why phishing attacks are very important. Phishing, it's part of social engineering that is used for cyber attacks. According to FBI, there are more than 300,000 complaints in 2022, hundreds of millions lost because of phishing. And if you see the latest reports by ENISA or CISA, those are the two agencies that somehow are responsible for cybersecurity policy and acts in European Union and the United States. Phishing is at the very top of cybersecurity threats. So because I'm giving this talk in London, maybe you have seen the popular press real incidents where victims of phishing, they're losing money. There is a lot of fraud around. And actually these days, there is the new business opportunities when you're doing phishing. So have something like phishing as a service where you can purchase with a few tens or hundreds of euros per month campaigns, and you can target your audience, you can target what are the impersonated companies, and then you can make some profit out of this. Okay, so what we bring new in this study is that for the first time, 3 ccTLDs, which means 3 agencies that are responsible for giving domains to countries, come together with academics like me, and we try to investigate what really happens. So these 3 ccTLDs is the Netherlands, which is operated by SIDN, the .ie from the .ie registry, and the DNS Belgium, who is responsible for the Belgium domains. So as I will explain later, our study, it's quite long. It spans about 10 years. And it's the first time that we get ccTLD records, not just TLD records as previous studies, but really all the domains that have been assigned by a register. And as you can see here, we have a much higher number of impersonated domains, about 1,200, compared to previous studies, and about 28,000 domains that have been used for phishing, which is orders of magnitude higher than what has been done so far. Just to introduce a little bit the data set we are using, the ccTLD of Netherlands has about 6.1 million domains. Belgium is about 1.7 million domains. And Ireland, you may notice that's significantly lower. It's about 330K. And this is because of the registry policy. So in Netherlands and in Belgium and in many other popular domains, you can have a domain just by purchasing that. For Ireland, you actually have to show proof of who you are. So you need either an ID or a passport, or you have to prove that you're actually operating a business in Ireland. Also, you may notice that the population is not really related to the number of domains. So there are a lot of other parameters like business activity, etc., that plays a role on how many domains each registry has. Now, when we go to the phishing data that we get, we rely on Netcraft. I think this is a UK-based company. This is more or less a de facto solution that most of the registries have to get feeds from Netcraft about phishing activity. For Netherlands, we have by far the largest number of domains that have been used for phishing, about 25,000. In Belgium, about 3,000, and much less in Ireland. And one of the reasons is because you have this registration limitation there. The periods are between 4 and 5 years. And also, for our study, we augment the data that we get from ccTLDs with metadata, like registration date, web measurements, DNS measurements, etc. So the good news is that if you see it over time, it seems that phishing activity is actually going down. So this is quite surprising result. It seems that some of the tools that are in place, like Netcraft and maybe the experience that now ccTLDs have, actually help in reducing this. However, it doesn't go down very fast, right? You see that this slope, it's not really going down very fast. And this is the last good news I have for this. If you go to impersonated domains, then you see that we have a huge difference than what most of the literature reports. So if you go to the related work the last 10 or 15 years, you expect that a lot of activity has to do with the local domains. What our results show is that primarily the impersonated companies are international. So even if you are in Netherlands or in Ireland or in Belgium, most of the impersonated companies, which is actually the target companies, are actually from abroad. And if you can see here from these bars, it's the large majority of them. You also notice some very significant differences between the impersonated international and national companies. So as you can see on the left, you have all the companies, mostly international, and you see that the domains that are used for phishing are actually active for many months. As you can see that most of them, it's about 3 years. For the national ones, you see in strike difference that most of them, the registration date, it's only a few days old. So what this shows is that the target can be both national or international domains, but the large majority are international companies that are targeted, and by a large majority, they use all domains. So we call them compromised domains because those are not new domains that are registered, that only account for a very small number, about 20%. So in previous study about phishing, many researchers studied what are the new domains that are registered, and they try to have different policies in order to see if there is a flux behavior by criminals that try to do phishing. So what our results show is that this is not anymore the case. So a lot of phishing campaigns do not use newly registered domains, but they use very established domains. And this creates a completely different environment, not only because the crime somehow changed, or the crime activities changed, or the crime tactics, but also the mitigation is not as effective as we thought. So here, just to give you a schematic, you may have used or unused namespace. So what we notice is that most of the use space, it's actually utilized to attack or impersonate international domains. And the unused space, the new registered domains are used for the local market with the local companies to be impersonated. And this is true not only for Netherlands, but also for Belgium, and to a very small extent to Ireland because of the registration policy. Now, why this happens? So we believe that the cost of actually doing an attack is significantly lower when you try to use already compromised domains, because for this is literally free. So you have a much a larger space to actually impersonate and many more domains to use. For the more local impersonated companies, you have to actually pay even a small registration cost. So many of the criminals just moved to the free service, if you want, to do the attacks. And also they try to target more international domains because maybe those are more recognizable even by the national audience. Now, for the case of Netherlands, that we had more data, as you can see, the top two domains are international, Microsoft and PayPal, but there are also others like Apple and Google. And if you see the median age of the impersonated, actually from the URLs that they use to compromise, the median age is in the order of thousands of days. If you see the local domains that are primarily financial institutions, then you see that those are indeed newly registered domains with an average or median age of about a couple of days. Now, when we focus on the type of business, we see across the board that banking and financial service are the prime type of companies that they try to impersonate. But technology and internet services are also the top four. And then you have all the other usual suspects, including postal services, which is quite important. Now, as I mentioned, for Ireland, we don't see this phenomenon. And this is one of the first results we have that maybe we have to make the registration more difficult. So now some of the registries that we are working on, they try to see if the Irish model is suitable in order to fight phishing. Now, let's focus a little bit also on what are the companies that are targeted the most. As I mentioned before, Microsoft, Apple, Google, etc., are in the top of the list. In total, we find something around 140 companies. Most of them are from the US, but also there are other companies that have a global footprint. For example, Banco Santander has a presence not only in Europe, but also in Latin America. And this type of company seems to be the ones that are most popular for impersonation. When we focus on more neighboring countries, then we see that companies that operate in these countries are also quite popular. And this is because, of course, of the proximity of language and culture, economic activity, etc. We currently have also an ongoing study that we try to see if something similar happens with other neighboring countries, for example, Ireland and UK. And hopefully the next months we may have some results of this. Now, we also notice that some of the results may be a little bit more biased depending on the date of the time that we have for this data. For example, in Netherlands, we see much more activity for phishing domains, but this is also because we have more data for about 10 years compared to the other two registries. Okay, so let's see now how these results can actually help to improve phishing mitigation. So here I show you how the phishing works in practice. First, we focus on in the case of a newly registered domain. As you can see, for this domain, there is no history. So at some point, somebody registers the domain, and a few minutes later, or maybe an hour later, it starts be used for a phishing campaign. Then tools like Netcraft, it takes between tens of minutes to hours to identify that something is going wrong. Then there is a notification, and then typically there is a DNS level mitigation. But as you can see, this activity can last for some time, right? Now, if you have a compromised domain, you have a similar behavior. So for example, here you see a domain that is not super active. It has some requests by resolvers. And then again, at some point you have a peak, there is a notification, and then the mitigation continues. But as you can see, it's not going down to zero, but it continues to have some criminal activity for some time. So somebody would say, okay, then it's very easy to mitigate such attacks. The problem is that in many cases, there are many different parties involved. And because of this, it's not easy to automatically mitigate phishing attacks. So typically, you have three parties involved, which is the registry, which is what we have access to, the data. Then there are registrars, like GoDaddy, that pretty much take different domains, and then they sell them to end users that are called registrants. And in this case, you can find an example. You see share uid.nl. Then you have the register. The registrar can be a US company. The DNS provider can be somewhere in Sweden, and the hosting provider can be somewhere in Japan. So if you don't have in place the policies in order to inform all these different stakeholders about the phishing activity, even if there is a notification for phishing activity, nothing will happen. So for example, in the previous case I showed you, maybe SIDN, which the registry has this feed, but if GoDaddy or the hosting provider does not have this feed, then nothing will happen, except if this is written in the contract about leasing a domain. And unfortunately, these contracts were written many years ago. So right now, even if there is a phishing activity and only registry is aware of this, and the contract says that this is a responsibility for the registrar, then nothing will happen. So here I show you what are the current contracts and the current defense mechanisms that the different registries have. They have pretty much at the DNS level three options. One is to suspend the domain, and this happens only after some time. So for .nl, it's after 66 hours. For .ie, it's after 30 hours. And there is an exception here, which is not very common. In .be, indeed, the registry can immediately suspend the domain. Then you can delete the domain, and this can happen after some time in all the registries, or you can change the NS record to something else. And for now, this is only possible in .be. So as you can see, the problem is very complicated. There is not a single silver bullet that you can use, because each registry has its own policy, and this is not the case only for these registries. Every registry we have talked, they have a different policy. Some they are more aggressive, some are less aggressive. But the problem is that at the end, even if the registry can do something, there are a lot of different stakeholders involved, and this makes things very complicated. So in the case of new domains for .nl, we notice that about 50% of the domains can be the phishing domains can be mitigated using DNS, and this primarily happens by the registrar. So it seems that the companies that are actually getting .nl are more aggressive to do that. But again, not all these domains can be mitigated. For .be, about 50% happens from the registry, and this is because it has a very aggressive policy, and another 20% happens with registries. And .e, of course, doesn't have a problem because most of these domains have to be used only by legitimate users. Now, if you see it for the old domains, you see that there is a significant degradation. And in this case, only 30% of the domains that are used for phishing are actually mitigated, again, mainly by registrar in Netherlands. The percentage is very low for the case of Belgium, and it's relatively low also for Ireland, because although they don't have a problem with new domains, they have a significant problem for all domains. So only about 20% of the domains that are used for phishing are actually can be mitigated. So as you can see, there is a lot of space for those companies that do phishing to actually be successful, because even if the feed is available, the mechanisms that are in place will not allow this mitigation to take place at scale. Now we compare also what are the benefits of do a DNS versus a web mitigation. So for DNS, we rely mostly on the registry or the registrar, and about 50% of the mitigation can take place within 24 hours, and 24 hours is enough time to do enough damage. When you do a web mitigation, this goes down to 6 hours. By web mitigation, I mean that a compromised, for example, domain may actually redirect, instead of the phishing domain, to another domain that says that either the website is down or the content has been removed or something like that. So you see that there is a huge difference of about 18 hours in the reaction, having exactly the same feedback, right? For example, from Netcraft. And here is a real case that we investigated. This is actually a French bank that used a .nl domain. And what we find out is that the phishing took place for a couple of hours. Then when the registrar used a default domain to change, to redirect actually the phishing to another domain, then this it took a couple of hours to resolve the problem, and actually the DNS took much more time to make this unreachable. So in general, web mitigation is much faster than DNS mitigation. Now, a call for action. So why I do this talk to you guys, and my colleagues also try to reach other registries. We really need to create a community in order to understand better what's happening. We already have contacted, after this paper, some of other registries, and they saw that they're very interested in order to understand what is the phishing activity in their country. We also identified that the problem that some of the previous policies, including some of the EU policies about registering domains, can be partially useful. It seems that a lot of cyber criminal activity has moved to weaponize old and legitimate domains. So these compromised domains are actually account for 80% in our study. And we saw that in some cases, DNS can be useful. This is what most of the researchers have proposed in the past, but web mitigations are much more successful. And actually, it's a faster way to fight phishing than DNS. So we'd like, as I said, to change a little bit the agenda. So we think that we have to understand better how the cyber criminals can compromise domains. So we should move the focus from the DNS to actually URLs and how they operate. And of course, some of our results are now under investigation, not under investigation, under discussion in the legal teams of the registries that we collaborate, because based on our results, they have to change the contract that they give in order to be able to react better to phishing attacks. Okay, and to summarize, I hope by the end of this talk, you realize that international domains, international actually companies, are impersonated much more than national ones. Maybe the only exception is the US, because it hosts a lot of international companies. It seems also that compromised domains are much more popular than we thought before the study, to enable phishing attacks. And we think that the policy on how to register and how to react to phishing has to be revisited. And we need more data in order to understand how big is this problem. So if you have somebody that has registries, we are happy to talk to them. And we are going to share also all our tools for these registries in order to replicate the study and see what is happening in their registries. Okay, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you.
And in about 30 minutes, as I promised.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very interesting. Do you have questions from the floor? Maybe a question from me in the meantime.
Yeah.
Have you engaged with policymakers, and what has been the response? Because my perception has frequently been that they are very DNS focused and they
Yes, exactly.
have only one hammer and they think that DNS is the nail.
Exactly. So this is actually before I started working on this project, I also thought that DNS is the panacea for every problem. After doing this research, I think we have to really, move away from DNS. Anyway, the DNS tools that are used right now are quite efficient. So if DNS can do something, you can can achieve this goal. But we're talking about maximum 20% of the cases. We have actually the opportunity to talk to some of the registry operators, not me, but a colleague in this work, and they actually think very seriously to try to find web solutions because it seems that they're much more effective, as I saw here. But before our study, they didn't have a systematic, study or evidence that this is the case. So actually, by having this paper out and this work out, I think we can inform policy in this space. And we're currently talking with the Union of the European Union registries in order to see if something can happen not in a single registry, because if a single registry changes the policy, maybe the cybercriminals will move to the other registry that has a different policy. So we try to do this as at once for all the registries. Of course, there are registries outside the EU that's more difficult to influence, but at least within EU we can do something. And I count also UK, not EU, but Europe.
Yeah, I was going to say I was positively surprised when I attended the Internet Global Forum that the European Union people from the technological side of things, they actually were much more on the loop of what the underlying technology implies and means, and they were capable of having a conversation with technical people, even though they were not technical themselves. So I wouldn't be surprised if they could be approachable and on this. They were discussing with registrars.
Right. I'm also positively surprised that Europeans, not only you, but Europeans take things a little bit more seriously. One of the reasons that they have in some of these registries and in some of these organizations also research groups. So it's easier to actually have an agenda that, because you need also resources, right, to do all this stuff. On the other hand, what I notice, and this is somewhere that our work can help, is that some of the EU policies may go to the wrong direction. So, for example, now a lot of attention is of who has what domain, right? Which, yes, can solve the problem of fast flux, like in Ireland, but it opens a kind of worms for the use of personal data, etc., which is a problem of GDPR. On the other hand, the problem is somewhere else, right? So what our study shows is that you don't really need to own a domain to actually do that. You are much more successful. It's much more difficult to actually fight phishing when you use compromised domains. So, and for this, there is no policy, right? So once you get a domain, then you are liable. And if something goes wrong, then bad luck. I don't know if there are other questions.
So maybe one question from me. So some ccTLDs lend themselves for these like .io, for example, .be. YouTube uses YOUTU.be, that sort of thing. Does that make any difference in terms of whether or not it's used for phishing more or
Yeah,
less?
that's a good question. We don't know. Um, Definitely this ccTL, actually this is not ccTL, this is more like you can call them ccTL. This is not country, but yeah, they're high level domains. They may be misused as well, but in this case you don't have a national footprint, right? This is more like global already. So for them, I expect that it will be probably 100% the national because there's nothing else. We try to see if we can get access to .com and .net also and see. Verizon for some time allowed to do this type of study. I'm not sure if can still get access to the full list of domains, but definitely this is something we'd like to explore more. So the first step was first to understand a little bit the national landscape versus the international, but then we should go to uh, ccTLDs that are international by design, basically, or by construction. I saw another question.
Yep.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you very much, Nishan. Thank you very much, Georges, for your presentation. That's a really good. That's a really interesting presentation. I do have like my question is a bit twofold. One is about the challenges you found because you have collected a huge data set for this study. So what exact challenges you faced while the collection of this data? And my second question is about the expansion of this study towards the countries who lies on two continents like Turkey and somehow Russia. So how this study can be expanded
Yeah.
towards those certain countries as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for the first part. This study is actually quite difficult to perform because you cannot move data. So we do is we rely on people that are in different organizations to actually run our code. And for this, you have some necessary conditions. For example, everyone should collect their own data, and they should also run Netcraft. So the problem is that there are a lot of data, and you can only do this distributed because you cannot move all the data in one place. First, because they are massive, and second, because there are problems like GDPR that you cannot just move this type of data outside your premises. Now, for the second part, indeed, there are a lot of ccTLDs that will never have access, and it's very difficult to have access because of geopolitical issues or constraints. But also, many ccTLDs do not have personnel to actually run the code there. So we are lucky that the .nl, .b, and the Irish one have a small research group that can actually help there. But beyond that, I know that UK has um, some research group, .ch, the Swedish also. So we have reached these registries, and we hope that at least we cannot replicate maybe for the whole world, but for a significant part of the domains. And what's important for us is also because they have different policies, you can see this as a natural experiment, right? Like A/B testing that, okay, if I have this policy, what will be the outcome? Because, without knowing, they participate in experiment that runs for years, and then pretty much we can go back in the time machine and see what worked better and what was not successful. And also because of this time machine experiment, we could see also that some parts of the things that are reported in the literature, they're not anymore valid. I'm not saying that it was not valid at that time, but now they are not anymore valid.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That answers my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there are other questions.
Any other questions for George? Or maybe we'll ask you more questions when you come to the Christmas dinner for.
Yes. Please send me the email. I will be happy to do that.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks a
Okay,
lot,
guys.
Josh.
Enjoy your beers also in the pub.
Yeah, thank you very
Yeah.
much, Yorgos, and looking forward to see you in December, right?
Yeah, well, so you're not attending IMC?
Oh, yes, of course, yes.
Okay, okay, because you are the local one there, so I
Yeah.
expect some good suggestions.
Very true. Count on
Okay.
them.
Okay, see you there then.
Yes,
Bye, guys. Ciao. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.